The Christ in you reality that would change everything if you believed it. E. W. Kenyon. E. W. Kenyon spent his life showing plain, ordinary believers that the greatest reality they carry is not a feeling they have to work up or a performance they have to keep polished, but a person who already lives on the inside of them, quietly waiting to be believed. The Apostle Paul wrote it plainly in his letter to the church at Colossae, chapter 1, verse 27, to whom God would make known what is the riches of the glory of this mystery among the Gentiles, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. That word is not a wish, and it is not a poem, it is a location. Christ is not far off watching you struggle. Christ is in you. And everything Kenyon ever taught about victory starts right there, in that one settled fact. So here is a fresh way to say it back to yourself. An affirmation in plain language, first person, present tense, 3 parts. With an anchor phrase we will keep saying the same way every single time. Christ is in me this very moment. His life is now flowing as my life. I carry glory on the inside. Say it with me. Christ is in me this very moment. His life is now flowing as my life. I carry glory on the inside. Again, Christ is in me this very moment. His life is now flowing as my life. I carry glory on the inside. And Kenyon would tell you, keep coming back for this kind of teaching, so subscribe now, that tomorrow's word can find you the same way this one did. If that anchor phrase already feels true somewhere down in you, even a little, type the 2 words, I'm ready, down in the comments, and let's build on that together. The first law is that Christ in you is not a metaphor. It is a fact you have been trained to overlook. Kenyon taught that the church had turned one of the plainest statements in the whole New Testament into a pretty phrase for greeting cards. When Paul wrote, Christ in you, he meant it exactly the way it sounds, a real indwelling, not a symbol of niceness, not a way of saying, try to act like Jesus, but an actual location where the living Christ has taken up residence. Think about how strange this is when you say it out loud in your own kitchen. You are standing there making coffee, and Christ is in you, not watching from a cloud, not standing behind you, in you. Picture a woman named Ruth who spends every morning rushing her kids out the door, spilling coffee on her blouse, running back for forgotten lunches. By the time she gets in the car, she already feels like a failure before the day has even started. She has spent years assuming this frazzled feeling is simply who she is. But Kenyon would ask her to pause right there in the driveway and consider that the very moment she feels most scattered is the moment Christ is most literally present inside her chest. Not far off, not disappointed in her, Kenyon said the biggest tragedy is that believers read that phrase every week and never once let it land as literal. They treat it like a compliment instead of a coordinate. So today, try this. When fear taps you on the shoulder before a hard phone call, do not just say a general prayer into the air. Say it to the one who is already inside the room with you, because he already is. Notice that this is not about summoning him from somewhere else. It is about recognizing what was already true before you noticed it, the way sunlight was already filling a room before you opened your eyes. So let's speak this decree together. Christ is in me right now, and that changes what is possible today. Again, Christ is in me right now, and that changes what is possible today. The second law is that this indwelling was not automatic. It was purchased. Kenyon taught heavily on what he called the great exchange at the cross, the idea that Jesus did not simply die to pay a debt and leave you standing in the doorway of heaven. He died so that his own life could legally move into you. Picture 2 houses side by side, one condemned and falling apart, one brand new and fully furnished. The exchange is not that the condemned house gets a coat of paint. The exchange is that the family living in the condemned house is moved entirely into the new one, and something of the new owner is left living there permanently. That is what Kenyon meant when he talked about Christ literally becoming the occupant of the believer. This did not happen because you got good enough, or quiet enough, or spiritual enough. It happened because of a transaction finished on a Friday afternoon outside Jerusalem. And Kenyon would remind people, you do not re-earn what has already been legally settled. When a man signs the deed to a house and hands you the keys, you do not go back every week trying to convince him to give you the house again. You just walk in and live there. Think of a man named Daniel who inherits his father's paid-off house. The papers are signed. The lawyer confirms it. Yet out of old habit, Daniel keeps sleeping in his cramped, rented apartment across town, paying rent on a place he does not even need anymore, because in his mind, he still feels like a renter, not an owner. This is exactly the picture Kenyon painted of believers who carry the indwelling Christ, yet keep living like spiritual tenants, checking their feelings each morning to see if they qualify for what was already handed to them at the cross. But qualification is not the question anymore. Ownership already happened. So when guilt shows up trying to make you feel like a visitor in your own life, remember, the deed is signed. The exchange happened once, and it does not need to happen again. Think of the ordinary weight this lifts. You do not have to perform your way into deserving the indwelling. You already carry it because of what was paid, not because of what you managed to do right this week. Kenyon said the cross settled the legal question forever, so that the only remaining question is whether you will move into the house you already own. So let's speak this decree together. The exchange is finished, and Christ already lives where I live. Again, the exchange is finished, and Christ already lives where I live. The third law is that God's estimate of you is built on what is in you, not on what shows on the surface. Kenyon spent a great deal of time on this because he saw so many sincere believers judging themselves the way a stranger would, by appearances, by moods, by how the day went. And he taught that heaven does not keep its books that way. Imagine a vault holding something priceless, and on a bad, rainy day, the outside of the vault gets muddy and scratched. The mud does not change what is inside the vault. It only changes what a passerby sees if they never open it. God is not a passerby. God is not judging you by the mud on the outside of a hard Tuesday. He is looking at what is sealed inside, which is Christ himself. Let me give this a face. Picture a woman named Ruth, who works the early shift at a diner. She wakes up already tired. She burns the first batch of toast. She snaps at her son over breakfast. She drives to work replaying the snap in her mind the whole way. By the time she clocks in, she has already delivered her own verdict. Bad mother, bad morning, bad person. That is the outer report. That is the mud on the vault. But Kenyon would ask her a very different question. What is actually sealed inside you underneath that report? And the answer does not change, because toast burned. The indwelling Christ was not short-tempered this morning. He did not burn anything. He is not scrambling to catch up. And since he now lives where Ruth lives, that steady, unshaken reality is what heaven is actually looking at when it looks at Ruth. Not the snap, not the smoke alarm, not the traffic. This matters practically, because most people build their whole sense of worth on the outer report. They snap at their kids and conclude they are a bad parent. They miss a deadline and conclude they are a failure. They feel spiritually dry one week and conclude God has stepped back. But notice how backwards that is. No one judges a diamond by the mud it was dug out of. They judge it by what the diamond actually is once you look past the dirt. Kenyon taught believers to develop the same eye toward themselves. Look past the dirt of the outer day and ask what is the actual substance underneath it. This does not mean your outer life does not matter. Your actions still touch other people. Your choices still carry weight. But your outer life is not the final word on your worth. So practically, when you catch yourself measuring your value by your latest mistake, stop and ask, is that the vault or is that the mud? And answer it honestly. The mud is real but temporary. It washes off. The vault is what remains true underneath it long after the rain stops. Kenyon would say, learn to talk to yourself the way God talks about you, not by your last outburst, but by what is sealed within you. So when Ruth gets home that evening, she does not need a perfect day to feel steady. She only needs to remember what the day never touched. So let's speak this decree together. My worth is not the weather on the surface. It is Christ sealed within. Again, my worth is not the weather on the surface. It is Christ sealed within. The fourth law is that because Christ is in you, His ability is now available to you. Not someday, not after more study, not after you finally feel ready, but right now, in the middle of your actual week. Kenyon taught that most believers live like a man sitting in a cold house, not realizing there is a working furnace in the basement. They shiver through the winter of their own weakness, telling themselves they simply are not strong people, not brave people, not patient people, while the whole time the source of strength, courage, and patience is already installed inside them, unused, quietly waiting to be turned to. Let me give you a picture of this, the way it actually plays out in an ordinary week. Imagine a woman named Carol who has to sit across from her teenage son after finding out he has been lying to her about where he has been going after school. By nature, Carol is a person who either explodes when she is hurt or goes cold and silent for days. She knows this about herself. She has watched herself do it 100 times. So as she walks toward that conversation, her stomach is already tight. Her old pattern is already loading itself up, ready to run the show again like it always has, and by every natural measure, Carol has good reason to expect the same outcome she always gets: a slammed door, wounded silence, another week of distance between her and her son. But here is where Kenyon's teaching would meet Carol in that hallway. He would not tell her to fake calm. He would not tell her to grit her teeth and force a smile she does not feel. He would tell her that the patience she needs for this exact conversation is not something she has to manufacture out of her own limited supply. Because Christ is already living inside her, and Christ has never once lost his temper out of fear, never once gone cold to punish someone he loves. That steady, unshakable patience is not a virtue Carol has to build from scratch on the spot. It is a resident reality, already present the moment she walks through that door. The switch has not been flipped yet, but the wiring was never the problem. The wiring has been there the whole time. This is why Kenyon leans so hard on the idea that his ability is my ability now, not as a nice-sounding phrase to repeat and forget, but because he believed it to be mechanically true, the same way electricity sits quietly present inside the walls of a house long before anyone flips a switch. The switch does not create the power. The switch simply permits what is already present to start moving through the room that needs it. Carol does not need a personality transplant before that conversation. She needs to acknowledge out loud, even silently to herself, that the patience required for this moment already lives in her, and then let it move. And this changes something deeper than just behavior. It changes the posture of asking itself. Most people, when they feel too weak for something, pray as if strength is a resource stored far away in heaven that has to travel a great distance to reach them. Please God, send me strength. Please God, send me patience, as though it is being mailed from another address. But if Christ is genuinely in you the way Paul described it, then the posture shifts entirely. You are no longer a beggar knocking at a distant door, hoping supply arrives in time. You are a person standing in a room where the lamp has already been wired in, simply reaching for the switch that was installed the day Christ moved in. One posture waits anxiously for help that might not come in time. The other quietly draws on help that is already present and only needs to be acknowledged. Think about how differently your week reads under that posture. The man dreading a difficult conversation with his boss does not have to talk himself into borrowed courage. He can quietly say, "The boldness I need for this room is not mine to build. It is already living in me." The mother, exhausted at the end of a long day with a crying toddler, does not have to squeeze out patience from an empty tank. She can say, "His patience in me is greater than my tiredness right now," and let that resident supply carry what her own strength cannot. This is not magic, and it is not denial of how tired she genuinely is. It is simply refusing to treat her own limited natural supply as the only resource available in that kitchen. Kenyon would tell you to practice this first, in the small places, because the small places are where the habit gets built for the larger ones. The tone you choose with a slow cashier, the patience you extend to a coworker who forgot something important for the third time, the grace you offer a driver who cuts you off in traffic. None of these moments feel dramatic, but each one is a tiny rehearsal in reaching for a switch instead of straining at an empty tank. And slowly, almost without noticing, a person who practices this in small rooms starts finding it available in the larger, harder rooms too. The difficult diagnosis conversation, the layoff announcement, the apology that has been avoided for years. So hold this steadily. The ability you feel you lack was never missing from you. It was simply unacknowledged. Christ inside you already possesses the very strength, patience, and courage your week keeps asking for. And your part is not to manufacture it, but to remember it is there, and reach for it the way you would reach for a lamp switch in a room you already know by heart. So let's speak this decree together. His ability lives in me, and I draw on it now. Again, His ability lives in me, and I draw on it now. The fifth law is that your words either agree with the Christ inside you or they quietly argue against Him. And Kenyon taught this with real seriousness because he believed speech was not decoration, it was declaration. Every time you open your mouth, you are either testifying to what is true inside you or you are testifying against it. Think of a wealthy man who inherited a fortune, but walks around telling everyone he is broke. Technically, the money is real and sitting in his account, but his words are shaping how he moves through the world. He passes up opportunities. He underspends on things that matter. He lives like a poor man even though the ledger says otherwise, because his mouth is agreeing with the old story instead of the current reality. Kenyon believed this happens constantly with the indwelling Christ. People carry the reality, but their mouths keep confessing the old identity. "I always mess this up. I am just an anxious person. I never get a break." And each sentence is a small vote cast for the outer weather, instead of the sealed treasure underneath it. Picture a woman named Ruth who has a hard morning. Her car will not start. She is late for work. Her boss is short with her on the phone. By the time she sits down at her desk, she has already said out loud to herself 3 or 4 times, "This day is a disaster. I am cursed today. Nothing goes right for me." None of those sentences are lies about her morning. The morning really was rough, but notice what those sentences are quietly doing underneath the surface. They are not describing the morning anymore. They are describing her. They have slipped from reporting an event to declaring an identity. And Kenyon would say, that slip is the exact moment the mouth starts arguing against the Christ who lives inside her. Because nothing about him is cursed. Nothing about him is a disaster, and he is not far away watching Ruth's bad morning. He is in the very chair she is sitting in. This is not about pretending or forcing a fake smile over real pain. Kenyon was careful there. He was not asking anyone to lie about their circumstances. He was asking them to stop letting circumstances write the final sentence about their identity. There is a real difference between saying this situation is hard, which is honest, and saying I am hopeless, which quietly denies the very reality living inside you. So a practical habit Kenyon would encourage is this. At the end of a hard sentence about your day, add one more sentence that agrees with the hidden reality. Ruth could say the traffic was brutal today, and then add, but patience in me is bigger than this delay. She could say, I am worried about this meeting with my boss, without pretending otherwise, and then add, but I am not carrying this tension alone. Something steady lives here too. That second sentence is not denial. It is correction. It is bringing the mouth back in line with what is actually true, underneath the surface report. Think of it like a musician retuning a string that has slowly drifted flat over the course of a long tour. The string is not being replaced. It is simply being brought back to the pitch it was always meant to hold. Your words need that same small daily retuning, because the mouth is often the last part of a person to catch up to a spiritual reality. The reality was already true the moment Christ moved in, but the mouth has years of old habits, old fears, old family sayings, and old defeats to unlearn. So speak slowly on purpose for a while. Catch yourself mid-sentence if you have to, and simply ask, does this agree with what lives in me, or does it argue against it? Notice, too, that this law works in the smallest ordinary places, the way you describe your marriage to a friend over coffee, the way you describe your body when you look in the mirror, the way you describe your finances when a bill comes in. Each of those moments is a small courtroom where your mouth is either calling a witness for the sealed treasure inside you or calling a witness against it. And Kenyon's confidence was never that positive talk changes reality by magic. His confidence was that the reality already exists because Christ is already in you. And your words simply decide whether you are cooperating with what is true or quietly resisting it. So let's speak this decree together. My words agree with the Christ who lives in me. Again, my words agree with the Christ who lives in me. The sixth law is that Christ in you is called the hope of glory, for a very specific reason. This indwelling is not only your comfort for today, it is your direction for tomorrow. Kenyon taught that most believers treat their inner reality like a pillow, something soft to lean on when life gets hard. And it is that. But it is also something far larger. It is a compass. Glory in that verse does not mean some distant shining reward, waiting for you after everything else is over. It means a coming fullness that is already quietly forming underneath the surface of your life. Right now, think of a seed dropped into cold ground in early spring. On the surface, nothing looks different. The dirt looks the same on Tuesday as it did on Monday. No one watching from above would guess anything important is happening. But underneath, in the dark, hidden from every eye, the seed is already becoming the tree it was always going to be. The tree is not a fantasy floating somewhere far away. It is already present in seed form, organizing itself moment by moment toward what it will visibly become later. Kenyon believed the indwelling Christ works exactly this way inside a believer, not merely helping you survive the current day, but standing as the guarantee of where your whole life is actually headed. Picture a woman who leaves a stable paycheck to start something of her own, a small shop, a little practice, a modest studio. For months, the outer numbers look thin, the calendar stays quiet, friends start asking careful questions. If she measured her worth only by this season's numbers, she would quit by autumn. But something steadier is working underneath the thin numbers, a vision, a shaping, a direction that has not shown up on the receipts yet, but is already alive inside her. That steadiness is not wishful daydreaming. Kenyon was careful to separate the two. Hope in Scripture is never wishful thinking. It is confident expectation, and confident expectation does not come from staring at how promising the outer season looks. It comes from knowing who is quietly present on the inside, shaping where this is all going. That is why a man walking through unemployment can feel the full weight of an empty week, and still say honestly, "This is not where my story ends." Not because his resume changed overnight, but because the one who lives inside him today will still be living inside him next month, patiently arranging outcomes the way roots arrange themselves, long before anyone above ground sees a single branch. This changes how you make decisions too. When a hard choice sits in front of you, a possible move, a new direction, a relationship to either deepen or release, you stop asking only what will soothe me right this hour, and you start asking what the one who already lives in me and already knows where this is heading is quietly leading me toward. Most people decide from panic or from whatever brings the fastest relief. Kenyon taught believers to decide from the hidden reality forward, letting the seed already planted inform the branch about to grow. This is slow work. It rarely announces itself with a dramatic afternoon. It grows the way every real thing grows, unseen for a long while, until one ordinary day the fruit is simply there and no one can deny it anymore. So hold both truths in your two hands at once. Today, Christ in you is your strength for the hard moment right in front of you, and at the very same time, Christ in you is the hope, the steady forward pull toward a glory that is already forming quietly beneath the surface of your ordinary week. So let's speak this decree together. The glory forming in me today is leading my tomorrow. Again, the glory forming in me today is leading my tomorrow. Here is the whole picture. Christ in you is not a phrase to admire, but a fact to live from. The exchange at the cross made this indwelling legally and truly yours. Your worth is measured by what is sealed inside you, and not by the mud of a hard day. His ability is already present and available the moment you turn toward it. Your words either agree with that hidden reality or quietly argue against it. And the same Christ who steadies you today is also the hope quietly shaping the glory of your tomorrow. So once more, carry this with you. Christ is in me this very moment. His life is now flowing as my life. I carry glory on the inside, and that is the whole promise of this teaching. Not a slogan to repeat once and forget, but a reality. Kenyon spent his life trying to get believers to actually believe, because he knew the moment you truly believe Christ is in you, everything about how you face this day quietly begins to change.